intimate chat with you today with our panel discussion, joined with wonderful panelists here. So I'm going to start with our agenda. We want to, actually, this is the wrong presentation. How about that?
Okay. I was like, we can talk about that stuff if you need us to. Yeah.
One moment.
I think you made some last minute.
Stiff competition. There are a lot of breakouts right now. Yeah.
Do y'all want to start with, I mean, because there are just a few of y'all, do y'all want to share who you are and what y'all do? Are you okay if we ask that? Yeah? Go for it.
I'm a data person. I'm a data engineer at Sling TV.
Thanks.
Very cool.
Thanks for joining us.
As of Monday, a D&I manager at New Relic, but formerly on our social impact team.
Very cool.
I'm also at New Relic. I am the senior director of recruiting for the product organization. So,
Thank you for being here.
That's all really different backgrounds. That's great.
but with a keen focus and love for this.
Yeah.
So, this is us. I think it's pretty straightforward. We're all here, so let's get to the agenda here. So, we want to introduce some concepts today. VUCA being one. It's a lovely sounding word, and we'll explain a little bit about that. Anna's with us from a tech accelerator called Fast Forward, and we've got a couple of tech nonprofits, David and Dave, are joining us here from Learning Equality and UPchieve, respectively, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion and then take any questions you might have. Starting with VUCA. So what is this all about? We live in a very different world than not that long ago. There's a lot of volatility. What does that mean? There's a lot of change in the environment. I'm not talking about just technically, but especially including technically. The pace of change is moving very, very quickly, and it's constantly increasing. Uncertainty, I think we're all familiar with what that means. Can't necessarily predict or make decisions exceptionally well because of a lot of different factors in the environment. One of which is complexity. Having many interdependencies, trying to understand connections between many component parts in a complex system, and ambiguity or ambiguous basically means that things are unclear, and that's even if you have what you believe to be good information. So what this is all about is the idea that we live in a very chaotic world. So you may even hear reference to a VUCA world. That basically means messy or chaotic. The concept actually originated from coming out of the Cold War, and from a much more understandable polar dynamic between powers to moving into a much more complex environment in the world frame. And what we're talking about is how all of that complexity affects us, how all of that uncertainty affects us, and particularly in the nonprofit frame. So we'll get into a bit more about nonprofits. For those of you who really want to nerd out on the subject, there's a futurist, Ray Kurzweil. There are others, of course, that talk about these things and the idea of accelerating returns. Basically, the idea is that throughout history, with progress, those improvements compound on each other, and we can't necessarily understand how these fast changes, these fast improvements that society is trying to make, how the future might look. So technology is a key piece of that, and how we all manage VUCA in our day-to-day lives is a key part of that. So I want to flip that paradigm a bit, and this is something that various researchers, including industrial organizational psychologists, talk about in a corporate setting, about flipping volatility into having a better vision, really focusing in on what do you really want and sticking to it, having that persistence of vision. From an uncertainty perspective, flipping that into understanding. What do we know, and can we focus in on that? From a complexity standpoint, flipping that into clarity. How do we create more clarity? How do we simplify things? How do we streamline our decision making? And ambiguity, being agile. I think we can all relate to this, especially in a lot of changes in the world over the past, I don't know, probably 2-3 years at this point, of we've all gotten a little bit more used to, even if it is taxing, making changes, having to adapt to a reality of, look, we're just going to have to roll with this. So at the end of the day, if you add all of those things up, much like chaos on the previous slide, we're talking about a mindfulness of learning agility, both organizationally and individually. So as you hear us discuss some of the topic today, you'll probably hear some of those themes and pick up on the fact that you have to be agile in these environments as a nonprofit with limited resources. So transitioning into why nonprofits, at the end of the day, because
really start looking at, okay, what's the future roadmap for their product to benefit the people they want to serve. And what's really fun, excuse me, about Fast Forward, I think, is that we're issue area agnostic. So that means on a day-to-day basis, I get to work with entrepreneurs and teams who are tackling education, like these guys here, or maybe they're tackling climate change, racial justice, healthcare is huge. And it's pretty phenomenal. That's a big part of what we do, is really kind of having people understand, and partners and mentors who come in to support, really kind of that light switch that can happen when technology is utilized for impact. So our accelerator, we roll up our sleeves and kind of go through all sort of things like that. And also it's important to note too that tech nonprofits are in a lucky position, but also a difficult position, because you don't quite fit 100% in either world. You're a 501c3 or an equivalent, depending on your country of origin, right? You're deeply committed to your impact, but you don't quite fit in the traditional philanthropy, social impact, CSR space. Like we were joking last night about capital. Again, the startup space, it's not uncommon to get millions of dollars or have a very large budget for your tech stack or for whatever platforms you're going to use. But often in the nonprofit space, it never comes across that millions of dollars would be spent on that from the get-go. They're like, wait a minute, it needs to go directly to impact. So it's a little bit of sequencing cart before the horse and traditional approach to philanthropy and impact that kind of has to evolve in understanding you need money for R&D, you need money for engineers to build the thing that's going to have the impact you want to have. But it can feel a little backwards sometimes. So we help tech nonprofits really kind of navigate that, not entirely being, a traditional quote unquote nonprofit, but also not being a startup, and that at the end of the day, their customers are their beneficiaries. And so that influences the product, that influences customer segmentation, that influences your earned income revenue model, business model, right? It's how you kind of shape and grow your organization to have impact. But at the end of the day, it's always about your beneficiaries and not investors or essentially chasing revenue, which has its place, of course. So at Fast Forward, we focus a lot on really specifically meeting the needs that happen in that space where you don't really fit quite in the startup space or the nonprofit space, but you need a lot of help. And it's a lot of fun to do the work. And I'm proud, y'all can see the stats here, that we have 68% of the organizations, we have 70 alumni organizations, have founders who identify as a woman, 81% founders of color. And this isn't on here, but we also have 86% that have firsthand or personal experience with the problem they're solving. That's super important to us, not just from like an obvious equity standpoint, but also from a solutions-oriented standpoint. We believe that if you were formerly incarcerated, you probably know better than someone who wasn't what you need when you come out of the system, right? Was it accessing a loan first, or was it applying for an apartment? Was it right? What was it you needed immediately? And we have several organizations that work on intervention exactly at that time. So proximity and firsthand experience is really important to us, and we truly believe those are the organizations and the individuals who can bring organizations to scale for the impact they have. And collectively, across these 70 organizations, these two included, impacted over 105 million lives globally. So we really are looking at truly sustainable, scalable impact, which is exciting. And one marker that we use is in terms of follow-on funding, right? We all know we need it to keep growing, to keep doing what we need to do. And collectively we've raised almost $360 million across these organizations, which in the nonprofit space is pretty exciting and pretty brag-worthy, if you will. And I'll note too about these guys, so they didn't actually go through the accelerator, because that was earlier in learning equality and UPchieve's journey. But I can say that I know they're founders, and it's really fun to see organizations like these two who have grown from such a great idea. And I mean, you all had it from the get-go, but it's been so fun to see, like our other alumni, they're essentially growing and evolving to where now the founders aren't here. Y'all are here because you're leading the work, right? You're addressing the challenges, and it's so fun that I've been in Fast Forward, and I talk about them all the time. They don't even know. Talk about funders, to potential volunteers. And so it's really fun because of New Relic that they're part of the Fast Forward family, and New Relic customers, which we'll get into, that there's this really nice connective tissue between us. And just to toot y'all's horn for a minute, New Relic is a partner of ours and just a company that cares. So just allowing for connection and time together to have conversations like this is really fun for us. And my job here, after talking about us, is basically just to make sure these two share their amazing work, because it's pretty inspiring, and the solutions they've developed in multiple ways are really, really incredible.
Bravo.
So with that, Am I going to introduce them, or are we getting on to questions? All right, here. All right, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Dave Sudia. I'm the CTO at UPchieve. UPchieve, we provide free, online, on-demand, one-on-one tutoring to low-income high schoolers in the United States. They're, at any given time, it's a cycling, group of people, but there's about 8 million low-income high school students in the United States. And so we provide a platform that has a chat and then either a whiteboard or a document editor. Students can come on and ask for help anytime. Math everywhere from pre-algebra up to Calc B, and integrated math, statistics, several science subjects, humanities, essays, college counseling, essay help, and we just launched reading last week. And then we have a pool of volunteer academic tutors who we have background checked and certified in these academic subjects. They set availability, and then they can either pick up sessions off of their dashboard, or we notify them via text message or push notification to say, hey, you've said that right now you're available, there's a kid who needs help with Calc A waiting, can you hop on and help them? And then they get into a session and help them. And we came out of, to kind of go to Anna's point about the founders, our founder, Allie Murray, she was a low-income high school student in Brooklyn. Her mom is an immigrant. And so she academically was very successful, but really could have used college counseling services, ended up going to community college and then taking about 6 more years to get through Penn, and then went to go work for JP Morgan. And at JP Morgan, she had no time, but really wanted to continue doing her volunteering work, but she was working 100 hours a week or whatever you do as a financial person. And so, working tech, who has time for that? And so she was like, oh, if only there was a way that I could volunteer at 11:30 at night, and I know that there are kids who need help at 11:30 at night. Right, and so she came up with this concept, and the MVP got built out, and then I got to come on after most of the hard work was done, just scale it up. It's which is equally challenging. So it's an awesome organization to be part of, there's been a lot of learning over the last year and a half. Again, to speak to some of Anna's points around, my technology budget last year was $10,000. We have, it's a lot more now, but that's come from fundraising. Fundraising is an interesting challenge because, I learned, like, you go to most philanthropies and you say, we're a tutoring organization. They say, great, what 40 kids are you going to double the academic achievement of this year? And we're like, we're going to help 5 million students do better on their tests, but we can't, but we're not going to have, like, immediate, academic improvement proof for you. And so there's this tension between how philanthropists approach what they expect a nonprofit to do, what we're trying to do in this scalable solution. That it's been a really fun challenge, and we'll talk about it a bit more after David introduces himself.
Thanks. I'm David. That's Dave. I'm David.
We pre-agreed on this. So.
David Kanyas. I'm the lead site reliability engineer at Learning Equality. Learning Equality is an ed tech company focusing on the offline education space, so that offline communities can have a quality education. And just to sort of think through what those offline communities are, maybe just take a quick beat to imagine a lifetime, your life, without the internet. Kind of rough. But that's the reality for 37% of the world and 8% of the US population, just no internet connectivity, no or low. So low meaning like it's prohibitively expensive or just hard to get to. The way Learning Equality addresses that is with a collection of tools. I'm not going to talk so much about 2 of them. Those are online. The main one, just Colibri, is an offline learning management system, LMS. And so it provides, the platform so that learners can learn, it's content distribution, assignments, etc. But also a suite of tools so that teachers can teach and over time, hopefully, grow. So far, conservative numbers, and counting is hard in the offline space because you don't hear back from all of them, but conservative numbers say we've reached like 6 million unique installations of Colibri, and that's across 215 countries and territories in, I think, 30 languages, 30 or 40, I'm not sure.
Very cool. So now we transition into our discussion. I'll start with a couple of questions for Anna.
Microphone.
So Anna, what types of challenges do you help prepare the participating organizations that are looking to face these challenges, some of the supports that you've talked about? Can you give us a little bit more color about that process, how they come to know about Fast Forward and how that process progresses from there?
Can I steal your mic?
Absolutely.
No, thank you. I'll answer your last question first. We hope, really through the internet, and those of us who have access to it, that folks find us, is the tech nonprofit space is relatively small. Kind of like we're talking about this very specific nexus. There's about, give or take, 600 to 800 globally. We actually run a directory. We try and keep tabs on people. And we have wonderful ecosystem partners that help spread the word. Our alumni are wonderful and spread the word as well. And similar to our partners, like we all identify and recognize that technology is a phenomenal medium for having scalable impact. And so we kind of always joke that our biggest challenge is that our biggest problem is that there's not enough tech nonprofits. So we want more every year, right? Finding us and applying, and even entrepreneurs understanding that this route is an option. Any option is fine, right? We need a lot of hands, a lot of help, but we believe in what we call nonprofit judo. There's a very specific benefit and power and advantages you can leverage when you are a nonprofit and essentially a startup. So we do a lot of work across marketing and whatnot to make sure folks can find us. And we do find year over year in our application process, organizations apply multiple times and then get into the program. It's really small, really high touch, generally about 10 nonprofits a year. But we believe that it needs to be right timed. You need to know kind of where you are with your MVP, where you want to grow, but you also have to be able to dedicate time. So a lot of factors like that go into it. And then in terms of our alumni and how we support, it's really what you all are talking about, like the insane growth, like 215 countries. Like, how the hell do you scale to that many? That's wild, right? Like those questions are a lot different than in early days where you're just trying to figure out what can we even put on our platform. How can people access it? In addition to how do we start marketing with a $0 marketing budget, right? So all of these questions change and evolve over time. And Fast Forward, we really say that you're part of our family forever once you go through the program, that as your challenges and your questions change and evolve, so does our support of you. And so we have really simple things like Slack channels. We were literally just talking about this. There's a technology channel where people will throw in there like, our HR provider is giving us a really hard time. Has anyone dealt with this before? And people will very generously provide their feedback or suggestions on different platforms they can use or tools. And that runs across all kinds of areas of needed expertise or different departments, platforms, tools, really you name it. In addition to that, I'm really lucky that it's a part of my job to work with our partners, New Relic, Google, Okta, Twilio, Atlassian, a lot of the tech powers that be and that power our world, to use essentially the collective employee base to volunteer and mentor our teams. So we do that in the accelerator and part of our alumni verticals as well. And we're just nosy. We're just in it with y'all. Wherever we can get in touch, we text Allie, we text Jamie, the founders. Like we really hopefully play an active role in trying to be supportive again as organizations scale and the needs, the challenges evolve. And I'll say, not surprisingly, during the pandemic, that was massive. If you can imagine ed tech organizations feeling-wise overnight, I'm sure your traffic, I would love to know.
Perfect product market fit for a little bit, but.
Yeah, which I think we should talk about that. But if you think about it in terms of distance education, distance healthcare, tech nonprofits and these guys and others were uniquely positioned to meet the need exactly when it happened, where you were already digital first. You were already meeting students and mentors at 11:30 p.m. at night on their own devices. Like that can scale, and that didn't need a transition, right, from going to in-person to digital. And so the past couple of years have been busy, right? And Fast Forward in terms of hopefully helping out with those changes and with the evolution. Similar with the Black Lives Matter movement. We've finally had a lot of our founders get the attention, get the funding, get the press that they had deserved and needed for a really long time. So knowing how to meet that moment as well and having an influx of cash and support and questions is exciting, but also that's a lot to handle. So kind of what's happening in the VUCA crazy world, we hope to meet the needs and evolve essentially how we support teams in really any way that they'll let us. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So Dave, can you give us just a quick second about your role, where it fits into all of this, and some of these challenges, the crises, some of what Anna was just alluding to. Can you give us a little bit more of a picture of how that's affected your organization and role?
Yeah, absolutely. And Anna, this is the part where I say the numbers that I know you were probably disappointed that I didn't include in the introduction. Yeah, so in February of 2020, we did 35 tutoring sessions. And then, as I just alluded to, we in March of 2020, we had perfect product market fit. And by September of 2020, we were doing 1,500 sessions in a month. And it was all running off a single DigitalOcean droplet. And that's why Ali hired me, is because I had experienced scaling startups before. And so yeah, we then by the end of the last school year, so 35 sessions in February of 2020, 1,500 in September of 2020. By May 2021, we were doing 3,500 a week. Yeah, it just, kids needed help. And so yeah, that was really cool. We've actually gone down year over year now because kids are, and this is what I love about being in a nonprofit, is that I'm not freaking out about that because it means that kids are getting help at school. and they're not asking for our help in the middle of the day because they're on a Zoom with their teacher and can't get their attention and stuff, right? So it's so while we're definitely we've started up a little student churn task force, it's mostly it's probably because kids are getting help. And that's the goal, so we don't have to freak out about our monthly active users as much as we normally would. But yeah, I mean, and I think I'll tie this into observability. In terms of challenges and crises we face, it's one of those things where we face all the same problems that you would as a regular startup. So in December, we launched a new feature. It was a new subject. We have a college counseling subject, and students had been asking for help with oh, but I have this essay on Romeo and Juliet or something, right? And the tutors would be like, I don't know how to do that. This is what I was in here for. So kids were kind of skirting around the guidance, and so we launched humanities essays as a subject. We got some volunteers, certified in it, and we misestimated the number of users who would use that feature by about an order of magnitude, and it became overnight our most popular subject. Our wait times, we strive to have kids wait no longer than 5 minutes to get a volunteer tutor, and our average wait time, I think, for that just shot to 35 minutes. So we had to suddenly scramble to get more volunteers, and so that was an interesting challenge of data and making estimations about where that data would go, because we had data on on what kids had done, but not the latent desire for that subject in a larger population. Another one that came up more recently, so that was kind of a nice, interesting mix of tech and business in terms of where the data comes from. But we just relaunched our mobile app. One of the unique challenges of being a nonprofit is that our app was mostly made at hackathons by a wide variety of people with a wide variety of skills. So most of our front end is a spa, but some of it is server-side rendered templates, about 5% of it, because whoever did that work didn't know how spas worked, but they knew how EJS worked, and so they did server-side rendered templates. And I always forget that part of the app exists until I break it. And then I'm like, oh God, it's right, it's the templates. And so our mobile app was just our website loaded in an insecure iframe in Cordova. So it was just it just loaded our website in an app on localhost. So we had a bunch of really hacky things in there around cookies to do push notifications. It's crazy. So we got one of our corporate partners to basically fund us rewriting our mobile app. It got rewritten in React Native. I launched the app. I go to New York on vacation. I land on the plane. PagerDuty goes off. And the app started crashing about every hour and a half for my entire trip. And so, so the first thing we did was we're on Kubernetes. We have New Relic integration. And so I was like, cool, something is sending us a massive amount of data for no apparent reason at random times. We don't know what to do about this. It is very deep. So we're just going to make it so the app comes back up as fast as possible. And I will see you all on Tuesday. Because I'm not missing Times Square with my son. And I mean, we were looking into it. I worked a little bit more than that. But basically we got back. And so we were, we sort of had to dig in. And we basically figured out that we have a whiteboard tool for the math and science subjects. And kids can upload photos. And what we do in the web is we get a signed like AWS bucket link back from the back end, we stick it there, and then we stick the link in the whiteboard. What the mobile contractors had done was just stick the whole image right into the whiteboard and send it through. And so we were getting these 15 to 30 megabyte high-res iOS HEIC files like just shoved into it, and we were trying to push it through Redis back and forth between the volunteer and the student over and over again, because we keep sending document appends through, and that was naturally crashing the app. So that took a lot of digging through our dashboard, not even the pre-made dashboards we had. Like that told us it's a large amount of I/O coming in and going, and going through Redis. But yeah, that took quite a bit of figuring out to figure out. And so it's those challenges that we have that require that kind of tooling, right? Like that, we have absolutely the same needs to have everything instrumented, whether it's our cloud, Kubernetes, our mobile app, our browser app, to figure out these problems. But again, last year going into, I have $10,000 to spend, which buys about a month of any given tool that we need, right? And so, so it's one of those places where it's kind of a fun challenge to sort of go around. And I think I was a middle school teacher before I was in tech. I worked in special ed. And so I have this already built-in skill of begging. And, and so like, can I have pencils and toilet paper? And so yeah, it's the, going around and writing grant applications and finding people like, organizations that have for good program and stuff. Has definitely been a fun thing it's a skill that paid off in a way that I wasn't necessarily expecting. So anyways, yeah.
So David, in your work, is there anything that comes to mind that you might want to share? It could be anything from a tip or just a little bit about the work you do and some of the challenges you face.
Yeah. I have a hard time with these kinds of questions usually because I don't like assuming knowing where everyone in the audience is at, but I can assume that documentation's hard everywhere. So yeah, I mean, on the documentation front, this isn't exactly documentation, but infrastructure is code. If you haven't done the thing, try the thing. Terraform ends up behaving like a documentation for us in lots of ways that we hadn't expected. And it makes things really easily recreatable. And sometimes we're not even modifying stuff. We're just like, how many gigs does that one VM have? And now we have like a point of reference. So yeah, it can be super dangerous and a little scary, but it works great. Another thing that we ended up doing was we sort of adopted so I used to work in IT, and in IT, you have like tickets, right? Where people call, you have problems, you document the whole conversation basically. So anytime another tech picks up the thing, they know where to pick up where you left off. I ended up sort of applying that to our sort of documentation practices because I realized that like programmers just really don't like writing complete sentences. And so I just sort of encouraged the guys on my team like, hey dude, just if you don't want to like write docs, I get it. It sucks, but maybe, drop a comment in this like Trello card, or now we're using Asana, in this Asana card, whether the thing you did worked or not, just so that we know sort of the path you took. And so
I'm in this picture and I don't like it. No.
So we end up with a bunch of like Asana tasks now that like there's no coherent language in it, but like you do end up getting a semblance of what was going on because every now and then there's like a command that they spit in there, or like a think might be network Kubernetes okay. Like, and you can sort of assemble what was happening. And even if you don't have a really good idea, it ends up being this interesting sort of search box for the next time something goes wrong. Because maybe we'll look up network and this card will pop up and all of a sudden we'll realize that we're facing the same issue. Didn't look like it at first, but we can fix it the same way. So this sort of slapshot documentation thing has worked out really well. And it has its side effects of just sort of, at least for me, I'm super forgetful. By the time Monday comes around, I don't know what happened on Friday. Picking up the task, looking at my incoherent notes sort of brings me back into the same mindset so I can just ramp up faster. So it's been really cool.
It makes total sense. Right on. So Dave, going back to fuck off. There's a thought process around this chaos, the craziness, which is humans crave predictability. And that's part of what this great challenge and the complexity, the volatility, the ambiguity that we're facing right now. Have you ever, in your work, thought about it perhaps that predictability in itself isn't the actual answer, that it's more about agility or being able to be responsive in the moment? In terms of data and your practice, how do you face this idea of craving predictability?
Yeah, I've got two metaphors for that, and one sounds nice, more professional, and the other one's less. So, I mean, it's not like bad or anything, but you get it. So, I was a very big getting things done acolyte for a long time, still kind of am, and I really like the metaphor presented in Getting Things Done of mind like water, right? Of this idea that like when you throw a stone into water, it reacts exactly to the amount that it needs to, right? The ripples happen, and then the thing comes back and becomes still again. And I'm going to take that and be a little bit like, I have ADD and bipolar disorder, and I am very not organized. My mom is an electrical engineer who became a dentist. And she is the most organized, boring person on earth. And you go to her laundry room, and the cabinet is labeled laundry soap, and you open it, and the shelf is labeled laundry soap, and the basket from the Container Store is labeled laundry soap, and then the things that fit in the basket from the Container Store are also labeled laundry soap, because you can't just put the box of laundry soap in there because it doesn't fit correctly. And I say this with complete love because that was a great household to grow up in as someone with ADHD and bipolar disorder, because everything had a place and it was always there and you knew where it would be, and my backpack was always in a spot. It's like, and so those things relate for me in the sense of like, if you have this solid base, right, then as unpredictable things happen, you have the ability to react to them without panicking, right? And so to tie that into data, it's one of these things where it's like, what you want is to, have that observability of your system and know, and you want to know where the important things are, right? Like you want to be able to know where to go find, like, if something's going on with this part of the system, I have no idea, it comes back to that thing I was just talking about. It's like, we had no idea that the images were coming through, right? But it was like, we could dial it down to like, it's network, and it's something with Redis, and then we could go from there and dig into the long tail of things and start to correlate them. But being in that situation versus being in a situation where you're suddenly going, oh man, I really wish we could measure things, is like a completely different place. And that's true for observability. It's true just for operationally. It's having the basic run books done. It's having a solid foundation of your backlog and the things you need to work on. It's any of that, because if you've got the processes in place, if you have strong structures, then like cannonballs are going to be fired at those structures all the time. But that doesn't mean it's not worth having the structures, right? It means that if you have a strong structure, you can deal with the incoming fire, right? And how you need to flex and move from that.
Makes total sense. I love that metaphor, because there are plenty of cannonballs and you don't necessarily know where they're coming from.
mean, coming from California, everything's made of steel for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Because it flexes.
Yeah.
Right on, right on. So, David, I'm just going to ask you a little bit of a different question here, going back to systems, and New Relic uses the terminology of observability, rightly so, right? And that immediately takes you to a visual place. Sometimes, though, I find it interesting to think about listening to your systems and hearing what they have to say. And it might give you a little bit of a mental tweak of perspective. If I ask you about that, about listening to your systems, is there anything that comes to mind to you?
Yeah, I think it might actually resonate with me a little bit more. Just because, I don't know about you guys, I've driven a lot of really old cars. And I've driven them long distances. And when you're driving a car, you want to use your eyes to drive. But again, I don't know if it's everybody, but I listen to the car to make sure it doesn't blow up in the middle of the road trip. So, yeah, it's, I like...
Being poor and driving is a highly state of attention.
Yeah, lots of input. And so, yeah, this whole listening metaphor resonates just because it's like, that alternator sounds a little weird. It can probably go for another 50,000 miles type of thing.
This belt will last till I get to LA.
Exactly. So yeah, it sort of reminds me of my day-to-day because it's not like I'm just like constantly observing my single plane of glass or whatever. It's there. PagerDuty's around to let me know when things like definitely do explode. And I check out the monitors from time to time to make sure everything's okay and where, okay, that looks like it might be a bottleneck that we hadn't anticipated. But for the most part, I'm still using my eyes to like do the day-to-day work that I guess, we're all probably familiar with. So, yeah.
Very cool, I love it. Very practical. So I'm going to skip ahead, given time.
Yeah.
So transitioning out a little bit, maybe first David and then Dave, what's next? Where do you see observability, New Relic related to your architecture or what's coming, where that fits into the picture, data-driven decisions?
Yeah, you said me first, right?
Yes.
Cool. I've mentioned Terraform. We've gotten all of our like actual infrastructure in there, our Kubernetes clusters. We're even using the Kubernetes provider to define like our deployments and all the stuff. Been super nice. We're trying to take that a step further and start doing like monitoring as code, which it has been challenging just because for reasons I can't get into because of time, we have to spin up lots of instances of the same thing, but they're all bespoke because they're for a particular partner. So we need to spin up entire like New Relic entities automatically and define entire dashboards automatically it has to be automated because they all have to look the same because they're all going to be side by side in several respects. So yeah,
All I have to say is, ooh.
Yeah, monitoring as a code
really
is
exciting.
It's complicated and hard, but yeah, we're pretty pumped about it. We've got a data pipeline that we're trying to work on. Again, offline space makes counting things complicated, but we have basically two different fronts where we sync up all the data so that we can look at it and like make sense of it. Those two different fronts are equipped for totally different sorts of queries. We want to get all of that into a column-based database. So, column? Row-based?
Yeah,
column-based.
Right.
Yeah, okay, cool. Bigquery is what we're
You're
aiming
the
for.
DevOps guy, not the data guy. You don't have to be perfect on that.
We're just trying to get it all in there and have it constantly update because even though we're not getting data regularly, we want to make sure that when we query that database, everything's up to date for funders and other stuff like that. So we're working on building out the network to make that happen. And learning lots of stuff about VPNs and proxies and cross-project communication in GCP. That'll
keep you busy.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I first want to say that's such a fun project, and it's one of these things where, as we, a little bit later, it's like there's a thing of like, how can you help us? But I think it's one of those things where it's like, I was at CNCF a couple of years ago, and like Walmart is doing offline, mini clusters at their stores that then eventually sync up with the central thing, and it's one of those things of like getting expertise. Like, yeah, you're doing edge computing
exactly
observability.
right.
It was like,
just
yeah, you got to go
thinking
talk to
the
the edge
same
computing folks,
thing.
who are
It's
building that product
exactly
here.
edge. That's right.
Yeah, it's like there's more cool problems in the world than I have time to be part of solving. Like, can I come work for you?
Right on.
But yeah, no, I mean, so I think the thing for us next really is that like, yeah, in terms is, we've got a mobile app now. We're probably doing the beta for y'all on the React Native in instrumentation, and we've got web and we've got server, and yeah, if the grant proposal comes through, we're going to be doing an ML pipeline, and we're going to be instrumenting that. And but so it's like we've got all the things in there now, but we haven't had time to get that structure, right? Like, it's not purpose. We haven't approached it with purpose. So we have some alerts, but they're not all the alerts we need. We have some dashboards, but not all the dashboards they need. Like, the data's out there. But I thought at the executive summit yesterday, Freddie from Platzi said this thing that was like, yeah, which is he has like one person on it who basically is their own team, who it's their job to figure out like the minimum number of signals they need to make intelligent decisions, and then to go tell the learning and product engineering teams, like, quit recording everything else. Like, you're
That's
just creating
optimization
noise.
right there.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I was like, yeah, that's the thing. Because, it's like, I love all the cloud native stuff, but it's like, you turn on a Kubernetes cluster, you get 200,000 cardinal metrics, and you're never going to listen to, you're going to listen to 105 out of the, and you could drop 195,990 of them, and be fine, right? And so it's one of those things where it's like, how do you cut through the noise? And so that's kind of the next thing for us, is we're just coming at it with intention of like, how are we doing this?
I love that, and that's first principles right there. Just purpose,
Yeah.
being intentional. I love that.
It should be in our future, but it's next after next.
Relative futures.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Exactly. So now we're just going to tie it all together, and I'm just going to ask each of you if you have a call to action or anything that you'd like to share with the audience at this point. So, Dave, I'll start with you.
Yeah. I mean, you can take steps as small as going to UPchieve.org and subscribing to our newsletter, and as large as, we are an open source organization. Everything we have is on GitLab, and we run a weekly meeting for people to come and contribute code. We also have non-code ways to contribute and volunteer, and then in the middle there's just becoming an academic volunteer. If you go to upchieve.org/sign-up/volunteer, you can, if any of that has piqued an interest, then you can get signed up and email me, and I'll expedite things, and get you through a little bit faster. And then, yeah, I think the other major way is like I kind of alluded to, making, anytime you hear, I think this goes beyond us to just any kind of nonprofit. It's like, oh, they've got my whiteboard and my document editor are not actually that great. It's like one of the challenges of scaling up this organization is, like our whiteboard license is a product that was donated to us. It's like completely encapsulated and we can't debug it, and so it's like I'm always looking for, are there any other vendors or anything that offer this? Is there an open source library that I just haven't found that someone's like, oh, you should look at that? That happens all the time, and so it's bringing expertise in, even in just like not a full-time volunteering, but just a advisory way is like super valuable.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, ditto, basically, on the open source components and the newsletter, or even just getting on the website, following blogs. We're on GitHub. Can make contributions if you're so inclined. We would love to have you, but even just like having solid issues reported, that'd be super nice, just because, again, offline, people talk about issues and they tell their, it bubbles up and then bubbles back down to us, but we have a hard time recreating things.
Faster path to quality, for
yeah.
sure. Absolutely.
We have community forums to participate in. There's always the donations, I guess, obviously. I guess that's for any nonprofit. We do crowdsource our translations. So if anyone's interested in translating, you can email me or info@learningequality and get like a full rundown of how to get involved there. That's super cool. And nothing else comes to mind right now.
No, that's wonderful. Thanks, David. Anna, anything that?
Sure. Similarly, just sending y'all to ffwd.org. Our website. Did I do that? Here we go. Weird. I think I turned it off. Sorry. Following our newsletter, following us on social. It's little things like that that really help all nonprofits. Awareness, visibility is huge. And then I'll say that our newsletter shares exciting updates from organizations like theirs and others. So you can kind of get read in if you're excited about other and additional issue and impact areas. And we have upcoming demo days where you are all invited. Our biggest one will be our virtual one on June 15th. And we're working with Matt and his team to make sure that everybody has the info so y'all can get excited and come tune in to hear this year's cohort. These are like the OG. They're like the rock stars. They're matured, tackling all these things. These are our new guys, our new really early stage orgs, and they're all great.
That's awesome.
Sorry, I will amend just because you just reminded me, Anna. Thank you. See, this is why you're in Fast Forward. Definitely just like tell your friends. I feel like a lot of people don't really understand how many people don't have internet because it's really hard to imagine a life without internet. So it's like a problem, and there are people trying to go to school and learn stuff in those contexts too. And yeah, thanks. Sorry.
No, sorry at all. Honestly, I'm glad you said it. Thank you. So from New Relic, newrelic.org, social impact. First of all, I just want to call out again, we have our grant fund. It's open. Share it. If you're connected with a nonprofit or are part of a nonprofit organization, please, we're bringing everybody in. We're excited about it. So, and I also really want to thank you for spending your time with us.
Yes.
And especially the panelists invested a lot of time and energy in very busy organizations and roles to be part of this. And I can just say personally, this has been awesome. It's been delightful for me to be able to connect with each of you on a more personal level and in person. It's amazing how the past couple of years we've all just adapted, and being able to do this has been really, really fun, and you've done a spectacular job. Thank you for turning out. Let's all go have lunch. Appreciate it.
Thanks.